Hello, everyone, and welcome to this interview today. I am Avocat Olivia Marcu-Iordanescu, and as every Thursday evening, I am inviting you to a powerful conversation with one of my guests. This week, it's Catherine Cantey. Thank you so much for being here, Catherine. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
You did an excellent job, Olivia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today with us. I want to welcome all the founders in the audience today for watching this. And I'm going to create a little bit the context and then introduce Catherine and then give Catherine herself an opportunity to talk a little bit about her work and some of the amazing results she's had with her clients.
Thank you.
So, the interviews and the weekly lives that I do are typically around technology companies that are raising funding. Mostly this is a strategy for those of you who want to achieve fast growth in the business. But it can also be that this fundraising process has to do with an innovative tool or technology that you want to implement to offer a better experience to your customers or clients, or simply become number one in your market. And so I am passionate about partnering up with technology founders to help them raise fast and efficiently. And I try to share not just legal tips, but also from the experience of other experts who have worked with technology companies in the fundraising process and beyond. Because as you already know, and as I've shared before, some of these strategies we use not only in the fundraising process, but also for growth and innovation, like I said. And I think it's very useful to have guests such as Catherine here with us today. So I'd like to also introduce Catherine a little bit, but I will give her the floor, so to say, to properly introduce herself. Catherine has 20 years of big banking experience, but is also one of the business leaders who has been able to coach CEOs and vice presidents and founders in using a unique technique, for which I invite Catherine to share more about. And I find that this amazing big banking experience, but also her success track record as a business coach and strategist, is invaluable to our conversation today, because she brings a huge experience to the table, and I'm really interested and keen on picking her brain today on the topic of board changes in the fundraising process. Catherine, please welcome once again. Thank you for accepting my invitation, and really exciting to hear from you directly how you see things and what your experience in the field has been so far.
Thank you, Olivia, for having me. I'm very excited just to be able to share experiences. And I think that's how we all learn from each other, is sharing stories of what we've tried in the past and what worked. Maybe we don't want to do that again. So if we can spare somebody the grief, I know I'm grateful to receive that. And I like to be able to pay it forward to others because people have helped me along the way too.
I love that. And I'm also curious to learn who have been some of your business mentors. And can you share a little bit with us about the technique that you are now using in your business to work with VPs and CEOs and business owners?
Yes, thank you for asking, and thank you again for having me. I work with executives, I work with teams and individuals, and we actually create measurable change, measurable leadership change in organizations. We do that because we use practical applications. The world's already too complicated as it is, and if we're in the technology world, it can get really complicated in a hurry. So we pull on practical applications, and when we use practical applications and we create accountability in there as well, we're able to accelerate the results and accelerate and sustain the end result that a lot of people are looking for right now. And you mentioned earlier about our track record, and we do have a 100% success with the clients that we're working with. All of the individuals I'm working with the coaching aspect, executive coaching, they have all created measurable leadership change, not just of themselves and what they think and what I think. It's more important about what the other people around them are seeing and what they recognize. So
Mm.
the leaders that I'm working with, 100% of them have created measured leadership change or measured change according to the people that are around them. And it's hard to change perceptions. And so a lot of times, if you're starting out with funding and creating a technology company, and then you hit all your different milestones, it's really easy to keep seeing us in the old light. And you really want to evolve when the business evolves, but they've always seen us a certain way. So how do we pivot and change the way we're seen with potential funders, with potential board members, and how do we navigate those conversations? And so I use Marshall Goldsmith's Stakeholder Center coaching. He's been around for 4 decades using this work. It has a 95% success rate for over 4 decades. And I marry that kind of the academia of it with my business experience of being in corporate for 20 plus years and being on the front line with sales, being in the back room with operations, bridging those communications, but making sure it also aligns with the boardroom strategy, because for 7 years, that's all I did was sit in boardrooms, hear what the strategy needs were, and be able to go talk to operations, and they could tell me what we could and couldn't do, and then go to talk to sales and say, can you sell it? And if you can, what can you charge for it? So when we bridge that stuff together, the conversations between the boardroom, the operational conversations, and then also the sales and the frontline customer language, when we bring it together, businesses can be vital and successful. And that's what I call business vitality, because the folks that bridge these gaps, bridge the opportunities, they're actually able to continue to be successful no matter what the market is doing, because they're responding to the market, they're working together as a team, they're collaborating. And as you grow in an organization, I found Marshall Goldsmith's Stakeholder Center coaching method. I'm one of 12 master coaches in the US. I have found that it is a great way to navigate conversations. It is a great way to reduce all the mental games that we have in our head, thinking that we got to do all this stuff. We really find out what we got to do in a very effective way and efficient way, because we don't have a whole lot of time. So he teaches tips and tricks, practical applications around how do you have a conversation with somebody and just pull out what you need, so you got enough to go and execute and deliver, because otherwise we get stuck in analysis paralysis. We make no decisions. We're not moving ahead, and we're just stuck. And so I love being able to bridge 20 years of being in corporate with customers, understanding business development, and then also taking that 4 decades of experience, because Marshall has worked with over 11,000 leaders across the globe. And he's also worked with half of the Fortune 100 CEOs. So the process works. These people are uber busy. They don't have any more time. But if we can find really effective ways to help create change within organizations, this is the way to do it.
Such a privilege to have you, Catherine, and I get so much out of this conversation. I'll try to start with the leadership part, because you mentioned that in the beginning, and I think it's a vital conversation to have for founders. Like, there is the one thing that is required for them to take their company, their idea to that level where they desire to, get, is, I think the one ingredient is leadership. And leadership, in my personal view, is not necessarily something we are born with, but it's definitely something that we can be trained into and grow into. So, in your experience, having worked for 20 years in big banking and corporate with departments across the boardroom and in operational teams and sales, and bringing them together, but also having applied the executive coaching technique, the method that gives the results as you've seen them on the court. how would you define leadership? What are the ingredients that a founder, for instance, would have to bring to the table to make that happen, to achieve their goals?
I'm going to borrow this from Marshall. There's three behavior traits: courage, discipline, and humility. And I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I get to go out and speak with people and listen to what they're saying after the talks. And the good books and the good authors and the good folks that are doing stuff, they're talking about courage and discipline and humility. And it's the courage to be able to continue to show up. And I was just talking with somebody, even though I was in corporate for 20 years, I'm 4 years out on my own right now. And I've stayed in touch with some folks, and he was just talking about, I love being able to watch where you're going. And I said, yeah, I said, it's just continuing to have the courage to show up and the courage to be here. I said, I'm on a 15-year path to being an overnight success. So like we can all relate to, we're going to work really hard for about 15 years. Somebody's going to show up and they're going to be like, I mean, you were just an overnight success, Olivia. How did you do it? And nobody sees all that stuff. And it takes a whole lot of courage to quit what you were doing and go all in. And I am married to a serial entrepreneur, and he has taken a lot of risk, and it doesn't fit the form every time, and it's not always successful. And because of that, it just takes an incredible amount of courage to continue to stand up, and that holds true in leadership. Next thing is the discipline. The discipline, even with executive coaching, the discipline to be able to go and have consistent conversations with other people in the organization or even outside the organization. It is so easy to just be reactive that we've foregone the proactive planning that we need. And we need that discipline in our life, because all the CEOs that I've worked with, they all have one pain point. They all consistently say, how can I create thinkers in my organization? I do not need order takers. I can fill up the seat with everybody who can fill out an Excel spreadsheet. I don't need any more of those people. I can find them all day long. How do I find people who know how to think? And so to be able to think and have the discipline to be able to create the routine that allows you the space to be able to be a thinker, to be a strategic partner at the table is huge. And I'm working with one team right now, and they're growing pretty darn fast with this organization, which is exciting. But the opportunity, not the problem, but the opportunity is, how do you take your senior team and get them to think and plan at that CEO level? Because now the CEO needs to be at a different level. How do we bring up a team of 10 to the next level of thinking? And then how do we get their next layer of managers to think like the leadership team, so everybody grows within the organization? Because we can only hire so many people, and at some point we got to grow their brains and not just grow, their job descriptions as well. And so we've created a framework around this of getting people to think in a very strategic manner. And to do that, you've got to have the discipline. You've got to stop doing and start thinking. And so we ask very intuitive questions of like, how are you identifying these certain opportunities, and what's your immediate behavior? And so we're going through this exercise, and all of this stuff is not just like a one-day workshop. This is things that we do in a 45-day cadence to be able to create accountability. So that discipline of being able to say, I don't know how to explain how to think like this, but I'm going to continue to invest and continue to do that. The last thing is humility. Like, we all have to have humility as a leader. We can be the best of the best out there, the best of the best. All they do is continue to find one more thing to get better at. In the beginning, it's easy to move the big boulders to create change. In the beginning, it's really easy to create that one big success. But then after a while, we've got all the successes, and you're like, how do we get better? We get better by not moving boulders, but by picking up the pebbles. And we can't be too overly confident that we're too good to bend over and pick up the pebbles, because when you get really good at your game, we got to start picking up pebbles, and that's where the game-changing stuff is. But you got to have the humility to show up and roll up the sleeves and pick up whatever the equivalent of the pebbles are for where you are. So courage, discipline, and humility are the three main things that are important for leadership, in my opinion, and Marshall Goldsmith's too.
And what has gotten your clients results, like on the court? I love that. Thank you for these three ingredients. And one thing that has come up as you were sharing this now, but also earlier in your intro, is the ability to have consistent conversations with people in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this brings up a very important ingredient, so to say, to our topic today about the board changes. Because I do agree, without having these conversations consistently with people across the company, somehow the vision will not become real. And this is what I've seen in my experience working with technology founders at different levels of their business growth, whether they were looking for funding or simply were preparing for an exit, because the board conversation also comes up in this context. So there can be founders who are simply looking to grow their business, and then maybe fundraising is a way for them. Maybe there are other strategies that might help. But there are also those who already know that they're going to make an exit and they are preparing for that. And then preparing the board also for that is a key element. And in my experience, it's really important that you have on your team people that are catalysts, okay, for this vision, that can really make the vision come true. It's not just about creating the vision. So how do we have this, let's say, difficult conversations with people in the board, with people in the operational teams, with people on sales, to really bring them on board with the vision and make it real?
So how to share the vision, is that the question?
Yeah.
So I love this. I've worked in a number of larger financial institutions, $30 billion, which is kind of larger for us. And within that, what I've noticed, just being someone in the seat and watching the leadership, and it was always the same individual that would always kind of stand up on the stage. And I traveled enough and I had enough exposure to where I heard him speak consistently. And part of this listening to him consistently is he always had the same message, no matter who the audience was. So he kept it consistent. He was very clear, very concise of what we were doing. And I'm working with one organization right now, and I've watched them transform because one leader started out with explaining why it is we're doing what we're doing. And that one leader saw the effect, and other people started doing it. So now the whole leadership team now explains why it is that they're doing what they're doing as part of the message to other people. There's also some great values exercises and purpose exercises. And this is what I enjoy doing, is tailoring the language to the individual and finding out what their purpose is, what their vision is, and like, how does it align? Like, you clearly articulate, Olivia, what your purpose is. Your purpose is to help these founders. You're there to help with the fundraising and find the efficiency. The clarity is there. And, you're able to share how you're able to do this. So if we can articulate at the operational level, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. This is going to be a great growth opportunity for our operational team. For the sales team, this is a great way to be able to go to market with a fantastic product. Bring sales and operations together. I have worked in both worlds. Too often they are broken down into silos and people stop talking. If we can celebrate that sales goes out there and brings in these great deals, because most people in operations, and I'm just kind of stereotyping here, most people in operations do not want to go cold call. And go ahead and celebrate operations, because these are our stability. These are our backbone in the organization that are keeping us alive. Have sales celebrate operations, because without them, they got nothing to sell. And so when we bridge these two partners together, it makes the boardroom conversations a lot easier, because we can see what's working and what's not working in operations. We can see in the sales side, this sells, this doesn't sell. If we could tweak this one thing, they're willing to pay whatever it takes for it. And operations says they can't do it unless they have a part-time employee. And if we just need a part-time employee to bring in buckets of money, like I was in that scenario, operations like, I cannot do this anymore, like no more. But then we found out, well, what would it take if you had unlimited resources? And they told me they needed a part-time person. And I knew what the customer is willing to pay for, because I was on the sales side. And I was like, that clearly outweighs a part-time person. Not only that, if I sold it to this one company, I had a half a dozen others that were lining up the door to have the same thing. So when we really break down why it is it won't work or why it is that we're doing what we're doing, gosh, we
Mm,
can like totally align a lot better and just like cut through a lot of these, these walls and these silos that are easy to go up. And sometimes I'm working with one group right now, like they're just in gridlock and it just takes time. So, how do you go get coffee and bring the human aspect to it? Like, how do you go have lunch, break bread, and bring the human aspect to it? Because when we go eyeball to eyeball people, it's a lot different than texting and email somebody and they're like, I can't stand this person. Well, there's no human interaction, there's no like connection there. And once we can have that breaking of the bread and the connection and listening to that they got kids and they got life outside of work, we can negotiate a lot easier because we can connect and realize that they're human. We can hear their pain points and we can solve together what the opportunity may be.
yeah, yeah, I love that. The human factor.
Yeah.
Um, wow, there's so much power in that. What actually I've seen happen, on the court. So there are two scenarios that I have in mind. Let's break it down a little bit, right? One scenario is where, like I said, the founder is thinking growth. They want to achieve that really fast. And then one route to go is to start the fundraising process. Depending on the growth stage that the company is at, it could be pre-seed or seed, irrespective. At the point where the founder is giving up equity in the company, the new shareholder, the investors, will be wanting a board seat. And this is one scenario. There will be board reserved matters and there will be shareholders reserved matters. So things that the board members will be deciding as opposed to the shareholders meetings. And there will also always be the operational level that we just discussed and touched a little bit upon. So to say, the people who are actually implementing the board resolutions and the decisions and have to make the vision, the directives happen in the real life of the company. The second scenario is, and I encourage all founders always when I work privately with them to already start creating this, is the exit strategy. Like, okay, it's okay to think today, what are your growth plans, which direction you want to take, but it's also more than okay to start thinking ahead of time. How do you want to exit? And it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you completely step out of the company, but also at this stage when you are trying to prepare for an exit, you also start preparing, becoming more corporate. You start appointing a board, you start making the company more self-reliable, self-governing, and you kind of get to the point where you need this board that oversees things, and you can take a step back and exit in one way or another, which is always a personal choice, right? And so when it comes to creating the board, to appointing the board members, but also to defining what would be some board reserved matters. What would you like the board to oversee versus what decisions they should be involved in? You really have to start getting very clear about these things. And what I saw in practice is that inevitably there is a clash, okay? There's actually two types of clashes. One level of the clash is when you have appointed people on the board and at some point you realize they no longer represent the initial vision. Something happened there. And a second layer is where there is a clash, like you also touched upon, between the operational, the day-to-day management, and what the board decides should be done in the company. Do you have any experience around these lines? Do you have any tips? How have you dealt in the past with, these types of situations? What's your best, so to say, advice?
I like what you said with the exit strategy and thinking about the end in mind. I'd like to think about anything with the end in mind. How are we going to get out of this? Because we're going to build something, or we're going to learn a lot along the way. And at what point do we say no more? At what point do we say it's been fun, but I think I got everything I need to? We need to let it go. So as far as like practical applications, I think when you're looking at the different board seats, like weigh the costs and benefits of these different personalities around the team. I've sat in boardrooms where you've got 30 people on the board. That's a lot of people to manage. That's a lot of, and
Oh,
the CEO's not managing it, but it's just a lot. I had one CEO explain to me, it feels like herding cats. Nothing is getting done. And then, you got like this culture of the board. And then if this like personality stuff starts happening and then it starts infecting other people and personalities on the board, like it's hard. So think about, the number of seats, the value of the seats, the benefit of having these different people at the table. And one other thing is, how long are these terms? Like if you trade equity for the company, what is the value for that, and put a time frame on it, because the company that you're at right now, maybe 5, 10, $20 million, is not going to be the same board and the same structure that you need at $100 million or $200 million company. So start
right.
thinking about, maybe just trading out different seats. Once we reach to this, we're going to be looking for these type of board seats. And I think another way, an effective way that I've seen other boards run, is the use of committees, and really getting the committees focused on what you need them to focus on. So whether it's going to be governance and you let them just dig into the governance, or whether it's going to be, the financial aspect of it, let them run into the financial aspect of it and give them jobs to do. Because if you don't give them very clear jobs and expectations as a board member, you're gonna just kind of have chaos sitting around the table, and nobody's gonna have a direction. They don't have a why. They don't have a vision of what it is that they're doing. And so making sure that you've got that structure in there with the committees. And I strongly encourage being able to have that annual planning with the board, having the self-assessment with the board. The best boards that I saw work together, they had a strategy session, usually the third quarter of the year, to go ahead and start planning for the January 1st kickoff. And it allowed the board to be able to understand where we stand so far as this year, and what do we need to do to close out the year, and what are we going to do to start kicking off the year. And so when we have that strategy session, again, we're breaking bread. We're not letting people hide behind keyboards, but they're coming together as humans. They're interacting together. They're getting to hear different stories with each other and different experiences, and they're able to bring value to the table. So, and I love the aspect when I went to the strategy sessions of the board assessment. They self-assessed themselves and how they were providing value to the company. And so that was just as important, because as a whole, are we as a board as a whole, am I as a leader on the board, the director on the board, providing the value that I need? And sometimes they might be able to have the realization, if we're going to be $100 million company, I don't have any value to bring to the board, but I can start brainstorming seats that we need to start bringing on the board. And if you have terms in place, then it's not like you're asking them to leave, but you're letting them know, man, I really appreciate, or lady, I appreciate you being here. You've done your 3-year, 6-year term. And now we're already at 30 million. We're ready to go to 100. So who do we need to take your seat on this board, to be able to kind of understand where we need to go from here. So those are some initial thoughts. And I have one other thought, which is sponsors around the table. Sponsors are very important when it comes to leadership. Sponsors are very important when it comes to the boardroom table. Sponsors, in my opinion, when I have to simplify the definition, is who has your back when the door's closed. And is that board table full of sponsors for you and for the work you're doing? And are you sponsoring these people? Are all the conversations pretty much the same, whether they're all in the room or not in the room? And making sure you've got the right sponsors around the table to support you and the business and the board.
I love that. Are you sponsoring them, or are they sponsoring you and your vision? I love that. Yeah, amazing. And Yeah, so much value in what you just shared, just making sure that you know what the objective is in terms of monetary objective, but also as a time period to put a deadline on the mandate, to define the mandate, to have clear terms around that, which kind of anticipates on the next question I had on how you transition from a board member stepping down and having that difficult conversation to a new board member who is going to bring you to your next stage and your next level of growth. And I love that you anticipated that a little bit, because when you empower the board members to actually conduct this self-assessment and be accountable for their contribution to the company, then of course this transition is a lot easier. It's natural, I would say.
Yeah, when you bring someone new on, maybe it's a 3-year term as a board member with an optional 3 more years, and celebrating the fact that we appreciate you being here and committing to this for the next 3 years, and this is the vision of where we're going and why we're doing what we're doing. And if you feel like it's a good fit, we'll explore re-upping it for another 3 years. But at the end of that, we know we're going to be in a different growth opportunity, and so begin to brainstorm. I worked with a gentleman in banking years ago, and he had a drawer full of resumes. He wasn't in the HR department. He was in the business development officer position, and he could develop business. But what he had was a drawer that he opened up. And if somebody needed a position for something, he just had a drawer full of resumes. And you can tell this was years ago because he had paper. And go ahead and start thinking about, if you like certain people, get their resume or get their name and just start compiling future board members down the road, because where you are right now may not be where you're going to be if you're successful and shooting for the stars, like I'm sure you are. Go ahead and start thinking, who's that dream board member that we really want to have? Who's already at the $100 million mark? And how do we begin to talk to them and know that the board that we have right now, go ahead and have a conversation. Gosh, so many organizations I work with, they're talking to me and I'm like, guys, you don't need to talk to me. You need to talk to each other. I need to work myself out of this position because I'm trying to coach you and build you up to have conversations with each other, because the quicker you can have conversations with each other, like the smoother this stuff goes. And so if you can go ahead and say, I think in 6 years, this would be a pretty amazing board member because you'll have served your time. And if we're just having these conversations along the way, it's so much easier than letting it just be a complete shock at the end of 6 years. And they think they have a seat at the table forever. And you're over there like, oh, do I get rid of this person who has a $30 million mindset? And I'm now at $100 million. They're pulling me down. And I need to celebrate them and build them up and say, thank you for getting us here. And meanwhile, when we're at 100 million, let's bring in, these fantastic, next level board members. So if we're at 100 million, who are the board members that we want to consider, and maybe have a strategy session around that and let them dream and say, man, if we can come together and build this to 100 million, what does that board look like? Because we will have gotten us there.
Yeah, amazing. And this is super important because I love that we brought this up in this conversation, because so many of the founders that I've worked with, again, irrespective of the level they were in their business growth, are having a hard time to have this conversation, right? When bringing on really valuable, talented people or people to the board, but also when having this difficult conversation around how do we move on from this particular mandate and bring on new people. And I love that you're saying it's about creating it, really thinking strategically about it. It could look like this is what I would like to have, and start having that conversation ahead of time, to prepare for that, to understand also what are their expectations, but also what are my expectations. And it doesn't always have to be an urgent, rushed decision, which I've also seen a lot in practice, which puts a lot of pressure also on the company, on the budgeting, on the forecasting. but also a lot of pressure on the people who actually have to decide, the new board members, the managers, the executives, and so on. And these kind of decisions, I believe, require a lot of consideration, really making sure you have the chemistry, you have the goals, you are seeing eye to eye on what's important, because you don't also want to have people on the board who will always say yes, right, to
Right.
things. That's not the point.
Yeah, the last thing we need are a bunch of yes people sitting around the table and not being able to have that strategic thought partnership and be able to bring value to the organization and to the leadership team, because the leadership team's probably in that room as well. And being able to streamline conversations and not put a bunch of fluff in it, not put a bunch of emotion in it, but really name, this is the vision and this is the mission and this is what we're focused on, and have that very simply put. And then when something does happen, let's remove the emotion and just streamline. Okay, this is what happened. And this is the impact that it's created on the organization, the impact to the customer, the impact to maybe the boardroom, impact to whoever it may be. And then, circle it back to, that's not the best way that we align with our mission and our values. And so you very clearly taken maybe an incident or a conversation or something that happened, but first begin with, here's our mission, here's what happened, here's the impact that it created, and let's try not to do it again, because that's just not who we are. And that very simple, streamlined process creates accountability. And something else that Marshall Goldsmith teaches is to talk about the future, because we can't do anything about what happened in the past. So if we blew it up, that's fine. And we can do a postmortem on it and look at it, and know that this is the vision, this is the event that happened, the impact, and it just doesn't align with who we are. And when we have this conversation, then we begin to pivot and talk about, next time this happens, what will we be doing differently? Then people around the table have that free form conversation. It's safe to talk about the future, and it's easy to receive what we're going to do in the future. So it's easier to give, it's easier to take if we're talking about the future. And then from there, you're creating accountability around that table of, this is who we truly are. And we're not talking about he said, she said. We're not talking about, the gossip or anything. We're just talking about facts. This is what happened. It impacted the customer. It doesn't align with our mission. Going forward, this is suggestions on what we're going to do differently going forward. Then we're teaching foresight. We're teaching insight planning. We're teaching proactiveness as a result of something that could be an opportunity we can learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, as we're getting towards the end of our conversation, I would like to ask you, having worked with executives and C-level, often founders of technology companies will retain the CEO role for a long time in the company. And so I think it's kind of challenging for this person, this individual, at some point to draw a line between, I'm the founder, this is my passion, my vision, my baby, versus I am an executive officer here who, at the end of the day, needs the courage, consistency, and humility to cut to the chase and really look from a performance point of view. And when I work with this kind of individuals, I have to look from the legal perspective because I'm an attorney at law, but I always try to encourage them to, not look at it from a liability or conflict resolution or this type of approach at things, but rather to look at creating results and reaching objectives and things like that. So my question is, how in your work and in your experience, do you think it's possible to draw this line between being the founder, being the father, the mother of the company, and sometimes it's a family, it's a father and a mother, right, who are founding the company, and actually having to deliver results, cut to the chase, and have these hard conversations, what do you tell them in your work? How do they separate? How do they draw this line without living in a constant internal conflict, right?
This is very heavy for me because I've worked with business owners who have sold, and it sounds great and it's like this dream opportunity, and they've sold the company and they're still in the company. And this is heavy for me because I've watched people go through this, and oh man, once you sell it, once you sign the papers, like, you can dream all you want, you can say you're the founder, but you're not in charge anymore unless you have your stakeholders, unless you are still the majority share. And most of the time, when you sell it for the big check and you sign that big contract and that's the big dream, you got to let it go. And I think there's a lot of deep therapy that needs to take place with the individual and the mindset, because you have built something. You have basically traded your life for this wonderful thing that's in front of you. Something to think about is you've built one before. I bet you can build something else faster and more efficient based off of what you know. And in order to speed up to get to that process, something to consider is, how do you grow your leadership team as quickly as possible to the point where they no longer need you in that business, and you have proven within 30 days, which I have seen this before, you have proven you're not really providing the value that maybe they thought they were paying for. And really, if you've got a business worth selling, it's your leadership team, it is the people in the company that are getting the work done, and you are no longer the big piece that's making this wheel turn anymore, because you developed your people, you developed your leadership team, and you allow them to stay. But really, if you've created something great, you are the creative, you are the visionary. Figure out how to get your people up to speed fast, because if you're the visionary, I very rarely see a visionary turn into a detail operational executive person who doesn't mind going into the boardroom to talk about how we're going to build this, with a bunch of thumbs on top of them, because they've got the directors that are telling them this is what we got to do now because we have the new investor in place. So figure out how to grow your people so you can get out, so you can go grow the next thing. Because I promise you, if you have built this, you can build a half a dozen more of these things if you've got the leadership team in place, and you can prove that you no longer provide value because it's your leadership team that's going to take this company to the next level. That is some hard stuff to hear. And that's why it's heavy for me, because I see these visionaries get trapped because they got the great check and that was the big dream, but the dream stopped.
Yeah.
And they feel like they're getting crushed in these new organizations that they built. So figure out how to grow your people so that you can go and do the next thing bigger, better, faster.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you said, the moment it's time to sell, to make an exit, when, your leadership team has already reached that level, or vice versa. If your leadership team is running the company, then this is the moment to sell. I love that.
Yeah. And that should be everybody's dream, because we don't want to do it all. I've seen so many businesses that have come in and it's still the owner that is running every single thing. You will never leave. Now you've got a new buyer. You've got somebody telling you how to run every single thing. You're going to go crazy. It's going to be horrible.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you so much, Catherine, for being here. I think I covered more ground in this conversation that I had imagined. We talked about what is leadership. You said that, in your experience and in your working with C-level executives, it's courage, it's consistency, it's humility. We talked about how to be a catalyst in the business as a founder, and to be able to bridge that conversation between operational and board, and really have these conversations consistently, because it is essential for the business growth wherever you are headed as a founder. we also talked about, when do you know that it's the right time to exit the company? And you said, and this is my favorite of this conversation today, that when your leadership team is leading the company, then you know it's time to sell. It's only a question of being straight with yourself and just getting ready for the next objective, the next big vision, and taking that leap if you want to. It's a choice.
Yes, we all get choices for sure every day. Thank you so much, Olivia. This was so much fun.
For me too. I love having you here, and I hope to see you again. I will prepare some more interesting topics, and hope to see you soon.
That would be fantastic. I would love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us on the Founders series, and I look forward to seeing you again. Let us know if you have any questions. I will be posting this recording. We are not going live. But if you have any questions, I will make sure to drop Catherine's social media contacts and her website. Or if you have any questions for me, happy to answer. Stay in touch and follow us on LinkedIn. Bye.